Go.
Hi, my name is Christine Beegle of the Blairstown Historic Preservation Committee. A little bit about our committee. We were formed in 2001 through the efforts of two great ladies from our community, Helen Hall, who was the town historian, and Anita Ardia, who was the first woman mayor of Blairstown. So we thank those ladies for having the vision to get a group started. We are a subcommittee of the Blairstown Township Committee. I wanted to give Gina Roseland a big thank you. She is part of the Warren County Division of Cultural and Heritage Affairs, and that's a department of the land preservation. They're located over at Shippen Manor in Oxford, New Jersey. The interiors are closed now, but you're welcome to go and see the exterior, which is exquisite representation of that time period. Some other thank yous I'd like to give out are to Fred Heilich III, Dr. Elliot Trummel, and Dennis Bertland, who are the historians who have really researched this subject for many years, have written books, and contributed to the National Registry of Historic Places with their information. So we were supposed to be set up over at Shippen Manor, and it was supposed to be an inside presentation, but due to COVID-19, we relocated over here to Footbridge Park in Blairstown. We do have a Facebook page. We're Blairstown, New Jersey Historic Preservation Committee, and Shippen Manor also has one, which is just Shippen Manor. If you type that in, you will get their Facebook page. So welcome to Blairstown. We were settled in the 1730s, and of course there was mostly European people who were coming here. We've had several names throughout the course of our history. The first of which was Smith's Mills, who was settled about 1760. That was Benjamin Smith who settled here. So, believe it or not, he had two mills, and so that's why it was called Smith's Mills. Butts Bridge, a little bit later. Gravel Hill happened in 1825, the same time that Warren County split off from Sussex County. And then finally Blairstown, which was named in 1839 and incorporated in 1845. And it was named after this man right here, John Blair. So we're here at Footbridge Park, standing in front of our Footbridge landmark. It was built in 1893, and it really was the main pedestrian walkway to get from the town of Blairstown in the main street back over to which way should I go? That way? Over to where the train station used to be, which if you look up that hill, it was right up there where the parking lot is now. So a very important train station. It was first the Blairstown Railway, and then it became the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. Oh no, sorry, New York, Susquehanna, and Western Railroad. Sorry, we've had two railroads that came to Blairstown, so pardon me for getting that mixed up. We were named, as I mentioned, for John I. Blair. He was born on August 22nd, 1802, and he died on December 2nd, 1899. So he spanned the whole 19th century and was an important time, of course, because we did so much as far as industrialization and just progressing our country at that time. He was all a big part of that. So an interesting fact that really I think will impress anybody who knows it is that at the time of his death in 1899, he was the richest New Jersey resident of New Jersey. So he was worth $70 million at that time. Flash forward to 2019, and the business group MSN did a study to find out who was the richest person of all time in your state. And guess who was still on the list at that time? Mr. Blair. His $70 million had become what is worth in today's dollars, $47 billion. So he's right up there still compared with all the top people who are business people of these days. So how did that happen though? What was the evolution? He really, came from being a farmer's son, and came into his own right because of his own, status and getting going and being an entrepreneur for himself. So our talk today is going to mainly focus on the connections to Oxford and Shippen Manor, and the Shippen family, but it really is such an expansive thing that this was supposed to be about a 2-hour presentation, and we're narrowing it down to as short as we can get it. So he was a Warren County native. He was born in Foul Rift, New Jersey in 1802. For those of you who know where Foul Rift Road is, it's just below the town of Belvedere. So you can still go there. His family location, his birthplace, is not in existence anymore, but it was at the end of that road. I'm going to jump and say what his family heritage was at this point, and start to get into how the Blair family is connected to the Shippen family. So his family was of Scots-Irish descent. He is of Scots-Irish descent. His grandfather, some say his great-grandfather, arrived in the 1740s into what was then just beginning to be Morris County, okay, because we've had several splits along the way that we finally arrived at being Warren County. He married Mary Hazlitt, and they had 5 children who were all boys, okay? And at that time, the family settled on what is Scott's Mountain today. And they soon, though, started to relocate once the sons got to be older. So son James, who was John I. Blair's father, he was born in 1769 and married Rachel Inslee. Together, all told, they had 10 children, one of which was John I. Blair. He was the 4th person. 2 brothers older than him and 1 sister. But by the time that John I. Blair was born, James Blair and his wife had moved down to be at Foul Rift. It's interesting because there are older siblings of his that are said to have been born on Scott's Mountain. So it could be that the James and Rachel were living with the family still until about late 1700s. So the family unit that I spoke of just now was one that came from Scotland and Ireland, and I'm just going to try to do the best I can to explain to you that there was a second family unit that also came to Philadelphia area. So the one unit came over here, the one person who immigrated here, John Blair, came here and settled in this area. There was 2 other Blairs about the same age, a Samuel Blair and a John Blair, who went down to the Philadelphia area. Okay, so picture in your mind these 2 people coming to 2 different locations. The first connection is that the son of Samuel, also named Samuel, this gets tricky, but bear with me, marries Susan Shippen, okay? And the Shippens were another long-established family of the Philadelphia area. Her great-grandfather was the governor.
Mayor.
I saw one that did say governor.
Maybe her grandfather might have been mayor.
Okay, so, and, but they had, definite ties to being leaders of the town and leaders of the state. And they also were doctors, so they had eminence in that way. And they also were involved with Princeton University. So you can get that kind of in your mind. Then you have the Blairs that I just told you about, 2 reverends that came down to the Philadelphia area. They were reverends in this church called Fagg's Manor, and that's the town, it still exists today, that was there. In addition to them being reverends, they also get involved with Princeton University. One of them is a trustee of the university. Another one really is the oldest one, Samuel, whose brother is John, also was a founder of Princeton University when it was still located in Elizabeth. And from that point, the son Samuel, he becomes somebody who was almost president of the university. And he turns away that title and that responsibility because Mr. Witherspoon, or Dr. Witherspoon, had first thought he wasn't going to do it, and then he decided he would do it. And in the meantime, the Samuel Blair, the son, had said, yes, I'll do it. but then when he knew that the Witherspoon gentleman wanted to actually take it, he went and relinquished that title to him and that responsibility. So if you look on the Princeton University website, you will see Witherspoon, but it could have been Blair, I should say. One of the things I'll say is that a second connection is that at the time of the Blairs that were here in Warren County, and James Blair, John I. Blair's father, at that time, James Blair was working for Oxford Furnace, and he was actually the foreman who was overseeing the wharf that was there, a big shipping location at the end of Falworth Road that used to be where Oxford Furnace would bring down their pig iron to be shipped to ports lower, like Philadelphia. I don't think anything went to Easton, but definitely to Philadelphia, and maybe some points, you know, beyond. But all along the Delaware River at that time there was no canal, so the main thing that you wanted to be able to do is get your goods that you were producing to a river. And so John I. Blair's father, James, was responsible as being the foreman down there, and like I was saying, that's where John I. Blair was born. So I'm going to go through kind of a timeline now, and we'll talk about the beginnings of the Shippen's involvement at Oxford Furnace. And I'm just going to do this briefly because there's a long, almost 300-year history is what we're talking about. But back in 1730, Joseph Shippen had purchased land at Oxford from Daniel Cox. Okay, and you'll hear that name Cox, not again from me, but if you were to look at old records, you'll see that that family owned property as far down as Phillipsburg. So that is a common name in as far as land ownership was concerned. But of course, it all got subdivided and subdivided. In 1738, the furnace tract was purchased by Robeson. Okay, from that point, in 1769, another major thing happens now in connecting the Blair family with the Shippen family, is that this Reverend Samuel Blair, who Jr., who I was talking about down in Philadelphia, marries Susan Shippen, and she was the niece of Joseph Shippen Jr. There's another whole connection up there. So from that point, in 1795, it is written that a Samuel Blair was managing the furnace, okay? And in looking at that, what I really think is that that is John I. Blair's uncle, all right? And we'll get into that in just a little bit because it really does make sense to me when I was thinking about it, because if there's a Samuel Blair who's John I. Blair's uncle up running the furnace at that time in 1795, he and his brother are down, his brother is down managing the wharf area. So you've got these two Blairs who are direct descendants or ancestors of John I. Blair managing the business at that time, all right? So in 1803, here's another point where the two Shippens and Blairs connect. Samuel Blair marries Maria Shippen. Now Maria is a descendant of Joseph and Martha Axford. So, you know, she's been around a long time. If you look in the old records, it definitely says that Samuel Blair was from Oxford and that she was also from Oxford. So that is a Samuel Blair who was up there, up here, and not the Samuel Blairs that were down in Philadelphia. So, unfortunately though, in 1805, Samuel, John I. Blair's uncle, dies. So he and Maria had just been married for about 2 years when he passes away. There's not a lot of information that says, you know, how that happened or why. And in fact, there's not a lot to show where he's buried. And it's not a lot to say, you know, what happened to Maria after her husband passed away. What happened to her? So those are some questions that we really don't know the answer to. But what I can say is that at this time, and I'm just trying to envision this picture of what's happening, you know, James Blair, he's got his brother working up at the furnace. He, then the managing of the furnace goes into different hands. And he really decides, James Blair, that is, John I. Blair's father, that maybe he doesn't want that job at the wharf anymore. And they decide to relocate over onto what is 519 now, in what is now Hope Township. At the time it was Oxford. So, and especially the case by 1809, Susan Shippen, who's Susan Shippen Blair, passes away. And so that really, begins the beginning of that time frame where the Blairs are not associated with Oxford Furnace anymore. Roberdew, who's the son-in-law of Susan Shippen, his wife had taken partial ownership of it when her mother died, and it really was too much. I have seen things written by Roberdew, Isaac Roberdew, who was someone instrumental in laying the outline of Washington, D.C., and also had a lot of other important titles. He writes that managing that and having that property is just going to be too much for them. They do live at the at Shippen Manor for a while, and there's notes that say that people came to visit them there, and they were living there. So by 1809, temporarily, this begins the beginning of a gap. The Blairs are out of connection with Shippen Manor and the Oxford Furnace until the Scrantons come along, okay? And that's going to be on down the line that we're going to talk about again in just a little bit. So there's about a 30-year gap between the time that the Blair family is not working for the furnace or any of that. Now, there might have been a nephew or something like that who was overworking there, but not in a management capacity, and certainly not in an ownership capacity. So we'll come back to this because I want to go back and tell you a little bit more about John I. Blair and his upbringing. So, as I mentioned, John I. Blair was born in Foul Rift in 1802 to James Blair and Rachel Inslee. About 1805, I was just mentioning this, sometime after James' brother passed away, they decide to relocate over to the farm that they call the Beaver Brook Farm. And that building is still in existence right along where, on 519, right along where Beaver Brook crosses 519 about 3 miles south of Hope. You'll see it up on the hill. We're very happy that it's still there. So at that time, more kids were born, okay? They go there. They have a total of 10, I've mentioned that before, but 7 boys and 3 girls was the final amount that were born to Rachel Inslee and James Blair. The farm is a sizable one. They certainly weren't poor. They had a 500-acre farm that they were running. And from that point on, John I. Blair's, younger days were spent just like any other kid, helping his family around the farm and attending school. He would have gone to school in Hope, okay, because that was the nearest school nearby. His first dollar comes along. There's a story about how he made his first dollar, and even into his old age, he was just so proud to talk about it, how he trapped muskrats and sold them down in Easton for $1. I think it was 16 muskrats. So that just gave him so much joy, and he actually even said of all of the major transactions that he did in his life, he never felt so much pride as he was when he was a young boy and got that $1 for those 16 muskrats. So that really impressed him. I read something else that I don't know if I interpreted it wrong or what, but it made it sound like he walked to Easton to do this. So, I'm just envisioning John I. Blair walking along 519 to get down to Easton.